Hey guys, just wanted to say before we get started today, I'm gonna talk about style, but also this is a really long one. I didn't plan on it being long, but I kind of just kept going. So if you stick around for the whole thing, that's awesome. If you only watch like 10 minutes, that's okay too. Anyway, thanks for coming to check out what I'm doing here. One day I'll figure out how to do it right. Hey there. So today I'm gonna talk about style. Um, Finding your style, how your style grows, what your style is, things like that. Because I recently watched a video of someone that made about I think it was called something like I watched 100 style videos so you don't have to. And I don't want to be I don't want to be dismissive of that person. I don't want to seem like I'm doing a reaction video to that. I just want to, I guess, put my 2 cents on the idea of style because it made me think. And what am I doing here other than just talking about things I think about art? It's been a while since I made one of these videos. The first, mostly because it's not that I'm not making content. It's just that the content that I'm making I'm not too happy with. So I'm kind of, you know, curating, I guess, differentiating, deciding what I should and shouldn't put out, things like that. Um, Kind of having trouble figuring out whether I want this to be a very personal, kind of confessional kind of thing, or if I want this to be more of a just sticking to art kind of thing. Um, so the real question that I'm seeing a lot when it comes to building a following and creating I don't know, like a voice or whatever is what is your authentic voice? What is the thing you're going to bring to the table that no one else can or that is uniquely you? I don't, want to be like, what's your brand? Because I don't like the idea of a brand. And I think my brand is literally that. It's just authenticity. Um, I'm thinking about calling this like no artifice, art being like the play on words or whatever, just because I don't like the showmanship that kind of comes with being a person on social media or a content creator or whatever. There's this sort of like I don't know. There's like this performative aspect that doesn't work for me. I'm not that guy. I'm the person who I come as you are kind of guy. I'm the person who doesn't pretend things are okay if things are not okay. I'm not gonna uh what's the word I'm looking for? I'm not gonna candy coat any of this stuff. So there's times when this shit is hard, and that is the truth of the matter. So anyway, let's talk about style. Today we're going to talk about style, and I'm going to do some drawing at the same time to kind of illustrate certain aspects of style. I'm also going to do a little bit of, I guess you could say memory laning a little bit, where I'm going to kind of show the progression of my style in a lot of ways. I tried to go looking for some stuff to show like the actual progression of it, like in the sense that like, oh, here, little 15-year-old Jeremy is drawing like Todd McFarlane with mixed with Joe Madureira, and that's a piece of art that exists, and it's very weird to see. But I couldn't find a lot of that stuff in like JPEG form, and I don't have all the time in the world to go digging through actual sketchbooks and stuff that are sitting in boxes. But I did find some stuff on like my hard drive that's like 20 years old or more. So we'll pull up some of that stuff, and I also will talk about like specific artists that are out there working or were working, things like that that directly inspired me, and I can look at my old work and literally point to that. So, without further ado, so we're not just looking at a blank screen, maybe I'll put like me, like, I don't know, some random time lapse or something over this first couple minutes. Anyway, let's go with the first example of what I want to talk about as far as style. Style is, here's the definition I came up with. It's sort of an ever-evolving dance between limitations, symbols, aesthetic taste, and inspiration. And the inspiration is not getting tired of the same old thing. I'm going to repeat that. This is the definition that I sort of, when I thought about what I think an artist style is, it is this. All right, here we go. Once again, an ever-evolving dance between limitations, symbols, and aesthetic tastes, and inspiration, or what I call not getting tired of drawing the same old thing. So, what do I mean by an ever-evolving dance between limitations and symbols? All right, so limitations is obviously whether you can or can't draw something. And what I mean by that, and I'm going to bust out some art right now on the fly, and since I'm being watched, I'm recording, it's probably gonna look terrible. Anyway, let's go with, well, let's just do what I always do. When I'm not warmed up at all, so this is like the first thing I've drawn today. So let's go with the idea of an abstraction or a symbol, because that's what symbols are what a lot of comic book artists draw with, in the sense that this thing is not, let's go with an ear. This is the first thing I thought of. So if I was going to draw an ear, I would literally just do this. This is me not thinking about it. This is the symbol that I use to draw an ear. All right. That's what I do when I draw an ear. It's literally just, I draw the shape, roughly, and like I said, I'm very cold this morning, in the sense that I haven't warmed up at all. So, these are literally the first things I've drawn today. But I draw the shape. I draw this little pointy thing right here. Then I take that pointy thing up to there. And then there's like a little Y shape right here. And I think the hole is like that. And the whole point I'm making, you'll see in a minute. And usually I just kind of futz this out. This is the symbol that I draw to draw an ear. Now, is this this is not a correct ear, I'm fairly certain. But this is when I'm in the middle of the weeds, drawing a head. Man, I am so not warmed up. Drawing a head. We'll scoot over, zoom in. Let's see, block. Let's lighten it up a little bit real quick. If I'm drawing a head, this is what I'm going to do when I'm drawing an ear. This is me not thinking about it. And this is what I think style is in a lot of ways. It's a choice in some ways, but it's also your default, in the sense that when I need to draw an ear, I default to this right here. But that's also what I would call my comic book art style. I went to school for animation, and I went to school for animation in the early 2000s. So I was in college for animation from 2001 to 2007. I have an associate's and a bachelor's in media arts and animation. So anyway, the heyday of my kind of, I'm just drawing now. The heyday of my my formative years when I was trying to be an animator were the things that were going on in those times were things like Lilo and Stitch and Dexter's Lab and Samurai Jack for sure. So these were the things that were like really big in the early 2000s, And these are the things that all my my peers were looking at. Anime came much later. And we were very, I hate to say it, but we were very dismissive anime. And the reason for that, you're not gonna like this, and I don't really agree with this anymore. But the reason for that is there was a bunch of what we called the anime kids, and they were just people who they didn't want to learn how to draw the right way. They just wanted to draw anime in the sense that they liked anime because as a style because they thought it was easier. Just banging out a really terrible anime drawing right now because they thought it was just easier. And what you'd get is you get a lot of what I call, we get like bad anime. That's really stupid. And they think that, they just needed to be able to draw the face shape, not understanding that underneath that shape, there's still, there's still a structure to making it work. Now, especially in the good anime, you'll see that. There's still a bone structure, and there's still, and I'm not professing that this is good stuff at all, so don't think I am. I'm just talking while I draw, or I'm just drawing while I talk. And the really good stuff, you'll be able to still put a decent foundation of bone structure and stuff underneath, underneath the art, or underneath the very, what do you call it? The very abstracted, which is the word that you use in art, the very abstracted stylized face of what anime is, which is, especially back in those days, it's a lot different now. But back in the early 2000s, when anime was first coming around, it was what the comic book artist Adam Warren referred to as saucer-eyed cutesy chicks. It was just a bunch of big old eyes. It still is to an extent, but it's since evolved in a lot of ways. If you see something like Studio Mirror, which I'll probably bang on, or I'll probably talk about in the middle of all this. So let's get back to the idea, what I was getting at. All right, so in the early 2000s, I was really big into Chris Sanders. And if you don't know Chris Sanders' work, I'm going to see if I can find some real quick. But he drew these incredibly, he's the main artist behind Lilo and Stitch. He's the main storyboarder and director of Lilo and Stitch. And I didn't mean to hit videos. And he did a lot of his figures, his art was very bubbly, very round, and very, it almost looked like it was melting in a lot of ways. So in the early 2000s, my animation style was very Chris Sanders. There's a bunch of stuff in sketchbooks I have of me trying to draw this, everything was like circle faces, like round noses, I did a lot of like the old black eyes kind of thing. There's a lot of drawings, especially back in those days. I drew myself a lot. A lot of artists did that. I don't know. We were just so full of ourselves, I guess. There's a lot of drawings of this guy in my old sketchbooks. Just me looking like I was drawn by Chris Sanders or something similar. But there's a lot of round shapes. His arms would be these things that were like something like, very rounded. And for a long time, my style was very similar to that. There's a lot of drawings that I did of me trying to figure out how, there's just a lot of stuff of me drawing very much like that. that's my college years. That's my animation style. That's me trying to figure out. You know, I'm just you know, what was the definition? It was the dance, the revolving dance between limitation symbols and aesthetic taste. So this is where the aesthetic taste comes in. I was big into Chris Sanders, so I was really trying to do Chris Sanders style work. Let's see if I pulled some up. Let's see what I can get here. Copy. And first. This is the problem. I'm drawing on the what do you call it? I'm drawing on my tablet. I should probably be drawing on the graphics tablet. Let me see if I can switch over real quick. I'll be able to talk faster and make more without having to do a lot of like thinking and whatnot. Okay. Where's that? Let's go. I'm so sorry. This is so embarrassing. Ha ha ha. Oh, here it is. All right. I can still draw with a thing like that. Okay. Chris Sanders. You can see a lot of very round shapes. This little cat dude, basically just a circle. This little cat dude, you know, basically we just got like a, ooh, I gotta turn the stabilization down on that. Okay. You know, just make a circle, but then like this bean shape is more like, it's very rounded, it's very bottom heavy. There's a lot of bottom heavy aspects to Chris Sanders' work. He does these very bottom heavy bean shapes. He draws a lot of cutesy girls too. You know, big bottoms, thick legs, and you can see that in Lilo and Stitch as well. Let's Chris Sanders drawings. Let's do Chris Sanders, Lilo and Stitch. Lilo and Stitch. Let's see what we got here. Let's do this. Copy. We're not gonna spend too much time here, but paste. Control T. Bam. This is actual concept art from him, it looks like. So here we go again. Just very, very rounded shapes. You see Stitch is just a ball, and this sort of almost like a ball of liquid, or like a water balloon. So anyway, my whole thing in the college years, I drew a lot like that. That was my animation style. I drew a lot of Lilo and Stitch kind of stuff. Now I put together a few things to kind of go over this a little bit. Let me see if I can find, I put in the limitations folder. Let's see if I can find some of the old stuff. Figures here, more Steven Cedric concept art. I do have it somewhere. Old stuff. There it is. There's my folder of the old stuff. This is stuff I drew in college. This is maybe like 2002, maybe. I was probably in the very early 20s. You can see I did a lot of rounded shapes. There's just these very okay, look like there was things. There's a lot of like very rounded shapes, very curvy, very circular, but this is also where limitation comes in. I was no good at drawing, you know, this very this looking up pose. So like you can see that I didn't know what I was doing, but I would call that style. I would say that's my style, and that would just be me, I guess, making an excuse for not being able to draw a hand right or draw a face right or whatever like that. But there's that round nose I'm talking about. That was part of my style for a very long time. I drew that round nose everywhere. There it is again. And everything's got this very rounded, almost like Pixar-y kind of feel to it. I did a lot of round shapes back then. But one thing you can't deny is I also had a lot of like sharp points and things like that. There was a lot of that too, and that because one of my other main inspirations was comics. So, I was like 20 and I was going to animation school, and in my teen years, the thing I looked at more than anything was comic books. I'm still a comic guy, but the guy I was most enamored with at that time was Michael Turner. I mean, who wasn't a fan of Michael Turner back in those days? So anyway, let's get back to this idea of abstraction and style, things like that. So what I think style is essentially is the thing you default to. So let's go back to that ear that I was talking about. So I'm drawing on the tablet now, so I'm going to be doing a little bit different. And that's another part of it too, like because I'm on a tablet, which means I'm drawing with smaller strokes, and I'm looking directly at the screen I'm looking up, not directly on the screen or whatever. So I have a little bit more control in a way. I can how do I say it? I have more control over what the final is, but I have less control over my strokes. I'm slower when it comes to shape language. So when I draw a face on this tablet, I have this shape is almost always what I default to. And it's this weird sort of symbol, as I'm getting at, that I've come up with that means a face in profile. The interesting thing is, when I'm on my XP pen, my drawing monitor, this is not really the shape that comes up. It's similar, but it's very different in a lot of ways. It's because my hand has more freedom, I guess. It just looks different when I draw it on the monitor. But I'm digressing again. So this is where I mean by symbols. That's not what an ear looks like. That's just the symbol I use to convey an ear. And that's really what style is. Style is what you default to when you don't have reference in front of you. It's the symbols you've learned to bang out like kind of fast to sort of represent the thing. Now, here's what I mean by that. Ear. Let's see how different an ear is when you have reference. Let's flip that, and we'll stick it right about there. Now if I'm drawing this ear with the use of reference, let's see what happens. And this will probably be very exciting. I'm going to try to be kind of fast about this. And I'm not really going to try to make it perfect, but point is, now that I'm looking at an ear, I have a little more of an idea what a real ear is supposed to look like. Let's see, we got that. A little shapey there. Here. That rolls around there. And that kind of does that. let's lighten that and kind of go over it with like a broad line. I mean, this is still going to be an abstraction, but it's an abstraction with reference, so you're literally looking at an ear. Now, here's right away I can see kind of the difference in the sense that alright, so when I'm drawing an ear without reference, here's what I think is happening. In my mind, I'm like, okay, I know there's a little pointy thing, that pointy thing right there, and then I know the pointy thing leads up to the loop, and there's this Y shape. You know, we'll go through all that again, and for some reason I thought, I know there's two holes, but the two holes are actually one hole. But anyway, my whole point is, I've kind of built this sort of go-to symbol in my head that represents an ear. And it's not correct, but it's good enough. It's good enough when you're drawing a head and you're not really thinking about it. It's good enough when you're just trying to bang through. But if I have what if, you know, I'm drawing like a splash page. Let's pretend like this. Let's just pretend like this head right here. Oops. I knew that was going to happen at some point. Let's see. Shrink that down. Let's pretend we got like an old school, like, you know, what do you say? What was that guy's name? Adam Hughes? No, not Adam Hughes. He died. He was a Batman artist in the 70s. He was like one of the best Batman artists that ever lived. He was one of the best comic book artists that ever lived. I'm having trouble with his name right now. Always wore a tie. He was considered like quite a hard ass when it came to portfolio reviews, which I never got a portfolio from him. I can't remember his name. I'm gonna say Alan? No. Neil? Oh my god. Let's find out. I'm gonna just type in Batman and because it's gonna kill me if I don't figure it out. Batman in the 70s. There he is. What's his name? You know what? I bet if I can just Batman in the 70s artist, it'll probably show up. Norm Brayfogle. It's not Norm Brayfogle. I feel like I'll know it when I see it. I can't remember. Neil Adams. Neil Adams. I bet it's Neil Adams. Neil Adams. It's Neil Adams. Yes, Neil Adams. I'm so sorry about that. Going back. I got distracted. I'm sorry. So, but the point was, this is Neil Adams. So Neil Adams used to do these. There's these very iconic pages of where Neil Adams would draw these pages that were just like giant profile images of characters, and like inside the head there would be, you know, another image kind of thing going on, whatever. But, you know, I guess my whole point is, if I'm drawing a big giant profile shot, you know, this ear better be good. So anyway, my whole point, style, is this is an abstraction of ear. And when you get to, this is how this guy draws ears, well, that's because without reference, this is how I think an ear looks. And when I'm not trying to, and when I don't really want to pull up reference to make sure that the ear is correct, this is the ear that I'm going to default to. So that ear becomes part of my style. But then you also get this thing where, if you're looking at cartoony kind of, cartoony art, sometimes an ear will be something as simple as that. Just a shape with a little indication. Let's do something real quick. Let's go back to Chris Sanders. Let's see what his ears look like. Chris Sanders. What does a Chris Sanders ear look like? Here's the Lilo and Stitch official kind of art. Oh, look, it's exactly that. It is a shape with a little bit of that. Of course, Chris Sanders draws very melty, round shapes, so it's probably something a little more like that. But that becomes his style. So this is where the idea of, it's a symbol that you choose to put onto your, put into your work. This is how Chris Sanders draws ears, but it's not because he can't draw this ear or this ear, which I wouldn't say this is a better ear. It's just this is the ear I default to. It's just that this is the ear he likes. This is the symbol that he has adapted to his work. It's the abstraction that works for him. So that's the other part of it, right? There's this idea that it sort of evolves. It becomes your fingerprints in a lot of ways, sort of like handwriting. You know how to draw an ear, but when you're not thinking about it, this is what you default to. But also because Chris Sanders draws these very bubbly characters, this ear just fits with it, it'd be very weird if you took one of my faces, which is usually a little bit more squared off, kind of mean looking, because I draw angry people a lot. And, I take that face, this is a terrible face. If I take that, and I put this nice little bubbly ear on it, it doesn't feel right. So that's kind of what I'm getting at. This idea that style is a choice, and it is also a default. It's also it's also part of your muscle memory. And it's also like this sort of, it's also like aesthetic taste and what you want your work to look like. Never evolving dance between limitation symbols, aesthetic taste, and inspiration for not getting tired. All right, so then there's the not getting tired of drawing the same old thing, and a very good example of that is Steven Sejic. His name is not pronounced like that, but he's Croatian. He's one of my favorite artists of all time. It's like Stjep Siege or something like that, but we all just call him Steven Sejic. Now, he did this huge style shift several years ago. Steven Sejic. Man, I don't even know. I don't think it's right. Maybe it's right. He did this huge style shift, but he did and he didn't at the same time. So if you look back on his old stuff, let's go to Steven Sejic Witchblade. You'll see he did all this really intricate sort of painted work. Now, let's see if I can get it to pop up. You can't see it. Whatever. We're not going to spend all this time. So all his work was this very, highly painted kind of stuff. And he did comic pages like this. I've read all of his Witchblade. Let's see if I can find some interior pages. Let's see. I'm getting nothing but a bunch of, I think I just burped on the microphone. I'm sorry about that. You get a bunch of just cover and pin-up images and stuff, but the man drew over 100 issues of Witchblade, and he did it like that. He did fully painted They're fully digitally painted pages, and they all look like this. I'm trying to see if, man, for some reason I can't seem to find too much of it, but maybe you can see what I'm saying. Like, all of his pages were these fully painted kind of things, and he did, like I said, well over 100 pages of it, well over 100 issues like that for some like 15 to 10 years or something like that. And then he had this sort of massive style shift, and in his interviews he said the style shift came out of him just being really tired of doing painted work. He had a lot of fun just drawing these sort of comic strips. Let me see if I can find some of his fun comic strips, where he would do these little joke strips, and it would be sort of half painted, half cartoony kind of thing. He did a lot of this stuff, and it just, he got to where he was like having so much fun doing that that's how he decided to start drawing comics. So let's look up Steven Sejic, Death Vigil. Now, you can see this stuff is still painterly, but it's very, there's also a lot of broad lines and things like that. And he said in interviews that he started to have so much more fun drawing like this because it was just, he was able to do it faster, first off, so he could do a lot more work, and he could focus more on, you know, the writing aspect and the character aspect and things like that. And this is, you know, this is the style evolving from, because out of a necessity of being burned out, being bored. The man drew so much stuff that he literally got bored drawing the other, or painting, doing the fully painted stuff. Sejic Ravine was what it was called. You can see so much of that stuff. He did so much of this stuff. This is a whole other book he did called Ravine, on top of the 100 issues of Witchblade he did. And every one of them are fully painted pages. They all look like this. So, you know, the man burned himself out in that sense. So he shifted his style back to that cartoony stuff because he started to have more fun with it. And that's also what style is. Style is also part of the things you enjoy doing. I had a similar thing in my style journey where I went from this sort of, see if I can find, I don't need that, see if I can find that folder, Style Talk folder. Let's see here. Let's go back to Terry Moore. Terry Moore was a huge inspiration for me, but that came a little bit later. Limitations. So where'd it go? Old stuff. Yeah, okay. So let's see if I can find some more kind of examples. If it'll wake up. Now here's more of me doing that sort of rounded, bubbly stuff. This is more like animation things. This is a Batman redesign I came up with very early on. I'm just doing this sort of motorcycle thing. I really like that sort of cape jacket idea. So, like I said, a lot of my stuff was very Michael Turner inspired, like really sharp shapes, really jagged lines. And eventually I got to where I was really unhappy with that. And I found other artists like Terry Moore, who has this sort of, here's more of that me really wanting to draw like Michael Turner stuff from when I was in my early 20s. Just so many sharp lines, a lot of weird little like shapes like this. This stuff is in like very thin waist, like jagged little hands, things like that. This is all Michael Turner or Top Cow, or just, that sort of 90s, late 90s comic aesthetic. That right there, that's 100% a Michael Turner. That's a Michael Turner face. That's me looking at a Michael Turner face and going, yeah, I'm gonna draw that. The hair, all of it. I drew so much of this kind of stuff. Yeah, more of me trying to draw like Turner. Here's actual Turner work. And you can see all these little jagged lines. These hands that look like they were like literally carved out of granite. The hair is just like choppy stuff, but you can also see that little 20-year-old Jeramy just couldn't figure out. He couldn't do it. The limitations. There was something going on there that Turner was able to do. Like, you can see the face, like that nose is 100% me, or the nose he drew there. That's me going, oh, I can draw that nose here. And that's how style works. You look at a lot of stuff and you're just trying to ape that stuff, or you're trying to, this stuff works for you, so you try to add it to your own stuff. Let's see how Michael Turner draws ears now that we're looking at it. It's a little too blurry to tell, honestly. He covered up his ear in that big profile. Let's see what we got. So, okay, that's the last thing on that, in that folder. Even here, there's a lot of jagged shapes and stuff. Let's go back. That's the old stuff. So, a little later on, I found Terry Moore. And Terry Moore has very painterly sort of things. He draws these very realistic characters that aren't over stylized or over sexualized. They're just these kind of, they're kind of real looking. They don't always have perfect features. Like, she has a little bit of a double chin, which the fact that he drew that was considered subversive or something for the time, Oh wow, he drew this thin girl with a little bit of flesh under her chin. He's drawing such realistic characters. But that's the way the comic world was back then. This guy was a massive inspiration for me. I loved Strangers in Paradise. I read the whole series in several years and stuff. And then here's some of my work from that time. I was drawing a book called Trash. A bunch of high school kids going through a school shooting. This is also me drawing on paper, or on Bristol board with actual ink. I went digital very shortly after this. But I was very much trying to do a Terry Moore kind of thing back then. Style shift, style changes. It's also based on your limitations. Now that little eye right there, that's an eye I drew all over the place. Just this sort of a line with with an iris under it kind of thing. And that's, partly because I didn't know how to draw eyes much better. I didn't understand like how they fit in the socket or whatever. They were just this stamp that I put on a shape of a face. And a lot of this kind of stuff, if this face, the mouth is too far out, but like this face is like it's like me shooting at a bullseye, and every now and then I'd hit it right, but I didn't know really what I was doing or why a face was wrong or whatever. But so like that's another part of the limitations. Another part of the limitations is me not being really great at perspective, so I did a lot of these sort of straight on shots that you don't really have to think about perspective too much. This is a straight on shot. This right here is a perspective shot, but it's a very simple 1-point perspective shot. I did a lot of these top down shots because it was very easy to do 1-point perspective like that. A buddy of mine used to be like, man, you're really good at knocking those, of using those top down shots. And it was really just because I didn't know how to use perspective that well. This is more me, you know, looking at Terry Moore and trying to ape his stuff. You know, I started to draw hair in a different way. I started to change my noses from that Michael Turner thing or whatever. But like that's the point of style is it shifts and it evolves, and there's a lot of stuff you can and can't control about it. Um, this is the first digital page I ever drew. I got a tablet in like 2010 and was like, I wonder if I could draw comics on this thing, and I tried it and I did. One thing you can see is Buddy Boy had no idea how to do a page flow. like this panel to this panel to this panel is pretty good because, you know, this leads to here, these lines lead to here, to this knee or whatever, but the fact that this panel overlaps this one is really messed up. Like the reading here is just awful because I can tell this is what it was supposed to be. It was supposed to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but that is not how you, that's not intuitive at all, because this line, you know, this one obviously is panel 1 and it leads to this, but this knee overlapping into this panel definitely leads to here, and the fact that this panel is on top of this panel would suggest that you should go here, but you know, it's very obviously supposed to be like this, but this is Buddy Boy had a problem with little Hobbs didn't know how to lay out a page back then. I had there was something there. One thing you can definitely see, I can definitely see this Terry Moore stuff right here, these very straight, jagged kind of, like you'll see that in especially a lot of later Terry Moore, is he'll take the brush or the nib and he'll say, like this shirt on the ground, I'm going to draw this whole thing with one line, and he just goes, and I tried to do that there. You can see the line breaks a few times, but it's very much me going, you know, trying to just knock out the shape without thinking too hard about it. I was also looking at a lot of Pia Guerra here. I can tell that too. That's me looking at Why the Last Man. Because that's how style works. This stuff just kind of, you get things through osmosis in a lot of ways. You're just like, you know, I noticed that a few years ago. To this day, it still happens. It happened a couple years ago. I was reading a bunch of Andy Kubert X-Men comics, and then I went to draw one of my characters, and he came out looking very much like an Andy Kubert character, and that was not intentional at all. I was just like, I don't actually want to draw like Andy Kubert at all, at least not in this point. You know, I mean, nothing against Kubert. Kubert's amazing, but that's not what I was going for. Let's see here. Let's see if there's like some points I'm trying to raise that I'm not really. So I already talked about I've already talked about like the symbols I've kind of went into, you know, limitations I've kind of went into as well. Let's see if I can figure out some a good sort of, maybe I can come up with like a good example of my limitations, like kind of informing, you see in my style through my limitations. Jeramy Hobbs, 2013. See, one thing that is definitely part of my style and has always been, no matter what I was doing, is at some point, I really fell in love with using a lot of black. I put a lot of black in my work. I was never afraid to put black in my work. This is when I found Sean Murphy, I can tell you that for sure. So I'm going to go through this page right here, and I'm going to tell you exactly how other artists have informed my style and what pieces of this work were formed by what artists. So right away I can look at this and I can be like, okay, Buddy Boy was looking at a lot of Sean Murphy at this time, and having no idea why Sean was doing things, but I was doing them because Sean did them. Let's see. These lines right here, they're, especially these lines here, I know what they're supposed to be. Like, these are supposed to be like sheets of 10, the little corrugated, the little wavy sheets of 10, and so like they have lines on them for a reason. But there's so many lines, and I think that's because I was looking at a lot of Sean Murphy. And Sean Murphy does a lot of like black silhouette stuff in the middle. Like he's like an incredible, he's an incredible compositionist. The man can do composition like nobody else in comics. But anyway, let's see. Steven Sejic. All of these birds right here, they are either created brushes or literally just black silhouette shapes splotched down and me kind of chiseling them out to make them look like something. That was a Steven Sejic thing. This line, this little sash right here, all these little white lines, that was Steven Sejic. He did so much of that kind of stuff. It's sort of a forgotten, how would you say, it's sort of a forgotten era of his style, but he did a lot of these really incredible black and white digital pieces that I absolutely adored, but he didn't do them for long. He went from the painted, he did that little black and white stuff, and then he went to that sort of half painted, half cartoon kind of thing that he's in now. Let's see if I can find some of those pieces that I absolutely love. Steven Sejic, Conan images. See if I can find it. It's one of my absolute favorite images that he's ever done. So like you can find this stuff in his DeviantArt. Ah, here's one of them. Let's see if I can get like a bigger image of this. You can see a lot of his stuff, his cartoony stuff here. This is his painted stuff. Like he did entire comics in this painted style, and he did hundreds of them. Okay, here we go. This is the stuff I absolutely adored from Steven Sejic. And it just be these digital things, and you can tell he's not like laboring over it. There's videos of him, there's like a Catwoman drawing video of him doing this where he's just like, you can see he just bangs out this black shape out of nowhere, and then he just like does all these little white scribbles on it to kind of give it some tone and some lighting. And then he has these like digital brushes to sort of fade out this giant pillar in the back. And this right here, you can tell this right here is literally just him, you know, taking the white and just like scribbling a shape and not thinking too hard about it. This is the stuff that I was absolutely fucking in love with that he was doing. And there's a lot of work from me trying to replicate this style of his. There's several years where this was like this is like this weird sort of sketchy stuff that he didn't care about, but this is like the thing I was aiming towards. I was like, I want my work to look like this. Click on Nabeziel and see if we can find more of that stuff. Now here's more of that comic strip stuff that he was doing that led to him getting out of this this painterly stuff. And he does a lot of not safe for work stuff, so if I accidentally hit some boobies or something in here, I'm very sorry. Let's see if I can find some of that. Doesn't look like I'm gonna find any more of that right there, but I was obsessed with this image. Somewhere on my computer I have this image saved, and it was just me just staring at it for hours. See if I can find here's another one that blew my mind. Oh, here we go. These are the the Steven Sejic black and whites that I was just enamored with. There's that Conan, there's that Conan, here's this Conan. It's another one that's very, it has almost like an almost, how would you say it? Like a Frank Frazetta kind of feel to it in a way, where it's just, the composition is incredible. But there's this sort of also, this sort of fun devil may care kind of attitude towards it, where you can see he's not laboring. And I think that's what I was in love with at that point, was he wasn't laboring over this stuff. These were coming effortlessly. And he was also doing a lot of this this right here, this chainmail stuff. I got heavily into making my own brushes and using them in ways like this. And if we go back to my work at that time, where's it at? There it is. You'll see that stuff. Here's a chain brush. This bush brush was the first brush I ever made, and I use it all over the place to this day. All this grass here. So a lot of my style is literally just the brushes I created that I use over and over again. And he had and for a long time, there was this sort of pervading attitude that stamp brushes were cheap, they looked terrible. And he was one of the first artists I ever saw use them in a way where it didn't look bad. Because I mean, I was going to college in the early 2000s, and custom brushes and stamp brushes were nothing new. There's more of that chain stuff. They were nothing new, man. In like 2003 with Photoshop CS5, which maybe not even 5, Photoshop 7 or 8. This is a million years ago. But even with like Photoshop 8, that you could do stamp brushes. But they looked bad. It was just like something about them just didn't work. So anyway, more of that stuff here. Let's see. These faces, this is me trying to do Pia Guerra, I can promise you that. But I was also definitely looking at a lot of Sean Murphy for like composition and stuff. This is a Steven Sejic panel. Steven Sejic inspired, not Sejic. This is my work, but this is like this right here. You can see me looking at that. You can see that Conan piece all over this, right? It's just black shape, squirrel, and little scribbly white lines. You know, this, you know, it looks good, and it's not a bad panel by any means, but if you look at it closely for a second, you'll be like, that spine doesn't look right. How many ribs does this thing have? You know, but you know, that's my style. My style is very much just a lot of these sort of brushes and texture brushes. And this was, I'm gonna say like 2015, 2016. So what are we looking at? We're looking at close to 10 years ago at this point. Can go really close here. So you're like, oh, here's this weird little choppy brush thing that I used to indicate a zipper. And here, right here, this is, I made this, I made these owls as a brush, as a stamp brush, because he's kind of gonna merge from owls into this guy. And rather than drawing a bazillion owls, I just drew like 5, and you know, use the brush. There was a lot of that stuff. I use a lot of black in my style, but that's really what it boils down to. Your style is this sort of things, like the kind of work you want to create, the kind of work you can create, and you know, the sort of friction that comes when you don't. And friction is also part of it, right? So like I could draw this face, but if I put like if I was to take this face, which I'm not super happy with this face, it's about 10 years ago, so whatever, but if I was to draw this face, but I put one of those like Chris Sanders style noses, oh hey, there's some Pia Guerra work right there. in the corner, and you can see you can see how similar these faces are. I definitely was looking, you can see that I was a Pia Guerra fan, especially with Why the Last Man. I think she's doing like what do you call it, political cartoons now. I googled her and all I could find was some Donald Trump crap. I don't think she's not. I don't know if she's a fan of Donald. I don't think she is at all. I think it's more of like a political cartoon making fun of him. But you can see that face right there and that face right there. They're not too far apart, right? That's how style works. You wanna you figure out how to draw things based on what you like to draw, or whatever. This hand right here, this is one of my go-to hands. I draw this hand a lot. It's almost the same as this hand. And that's because I don't know how to draw hands very well, especially at that time. So like, a lot of this, like if I had a hand reference, it might look better, it might look different. But because I wasn't referencing anything in that shot, that hand is what it is. And that's style is. Style is shapes that you default to because you're not thinking too hard about it and you enjoy it. There's like an enjoyment factor. You want your stuff to look a certain way versus, your limitations. It's like sometimes you just can't draw the things you want to draw, and your your inability to make something look a certain way, but like if you can't get to the stars, at least you can get to the moon. Getting to the moon is the the best you can do. So that's what your style looks like. So, to that young person who made that video, my whole point I'm trying to get here is this person was very dismissive of like the old adages of just be yourself, it'll come to you, don't try so hard. So here's the thing, right? It's an amalgamation of both things, right? So like this right here is, to me, one of the best pieces I've ever done. It's a cover, and it's a cover to Joshua Black issue 9, I think. Might be a later one, but it is you can see there's like a bunch of demons and these angels up here and stuff. But this is me neck deep in the work of Stephen Sejic and trying my best to replicate the stuff I was seeing. And you can see it all throughout here. You can see these sort of careless ink lines where I'm not paying too much attention to the quality of the line, and I'm paying more attention to the shape I'm making, and I'm just like, here's this. And it also helps that this is like a small, like on the whole thing, this thing is like a small image, so it doesn't really point up. But if I was drawing it bigger, but you can see it's just like, here's this black shape, and then I do all these little white scribbles inside the black shape. And then I wanted this sort of armored skirt kind of thing, and so I got all this like this stuff here, just kind of this sort of chainmail kind of stuff hanging off of him. Here's this chainmail brush, and then I got all this texture stuff here to sort of add a little bit of like brushed metal or like rough leather to his armor kind of look. And like you can see you can see that Conan image from Stephen Sejic all over this, can't you? I can. And there's more of it, like the chainmail brush all over this dude. And since it's really small on the image, it's not really perfect or whatever. This stroke layer thing, these sort of embossed kind of design stuff with a stroke layer, and it's just me drawing on a stroke layer in white, and that was all over the armor in this book. And that was because I saw those Conan images and I wanted to replicate that style. And that was, my limitations in not being able to draw as well as Stephen Sejic at that point. With also, hey, I want to see, could I take that that guy, that artist who was inspired by like Piaguera is also inspired by Steven Sejic, and it comes to something like this, and then you'll see these demons here. This guy right here, I guarantee you, I just drew a giant black silhouette, and then I just started carving white shapes out of it with looks like a lasso tool there, and I just threw some texture brushes and stuff on it, and that's me looking at Steven Sejic going, oh, okay, I see how he did that on that Catwoman piece or whatever, and here's these like segmented demons down here. All this stuff is just custom stamp brushes. All this stuff is just sort of plate armor brushes that I created to kind of fill up this bottom, these centipede kind of things. So and like I said, this image right here, this is me going, I want, me being like in love with the work of Sean Murphy. Sean Murphy came on the scene almost overnight in a lot of ways, and he would get upset if he heard that, because that's not how his career work was at all. But for me, it was very much this guy, who is this guy? I've never heard of this guy, to Punk Rock Jesus blowing up and him becoming like the most popular guy in comics. But it wasn't, for me, it was, I never heard of him at all until just walking through the comic shops, and I ran into, what do you call, Joe the Barbarian. I just picked it up on a whim, having no clue what it was, and it blew my mind. And the way he used composition, the way he used black, his ability to draw vehicles, just something about it just worked for me. And you can see I always enjoyed using black, but here's a bunch of hatching lines, me trying to replicate that stuff. But here's also, this right here. This is stamp brush stuff. Also, this whole thing right here, this, I guarantee you, this was a 3D model. This is me in SketchUp. I found a dune buggy, and then I attached like some Gatling guns to it in a weird sort of way, and I'm like, okay, I can draw this Jack and Daxter piece using, that 3D. I'm not that good at cars. I've actually gotten better in the last couple months. I did some, did some study, and I was like, oh, that's how ellipses work, So I'm a little better at it now. But I couldn't draw this car or this dune buggy unless I had the use of 3D. So don't be impressed by that. Same with this plane right here. This plane is a 3D model that I traced over. You can see this is the Piaguera / Steven Sejic stuff. I think there's a lot of Piaguera in this face. There's a lot of Piaguera in the clothing folds. Like, Why the Last Man had some of the best clothing drawings. 2014. Oh, look at that. Look at that, what do you call that? Look at that signature right there. That was me going, yeah, maybe this will be my brand. There is a custom brush for these laces, because why not? I guess you need that. There's a custom brush for the zipper. So this image right here was a cover for a pitch that I tried to get going for the book Illusions, Adventures of a Reluctant Messiah. I got a hold of the author and asked if I could pitch him like a graphic novel adaptation of his book, and he was very receptive, but it fell through because I couldn't afford to pay him to license the property, which came as a shock to me. I didn't really think I was going to have to do that. I thought maybe we would work together in that regard, but he wanted me to pay for the license, and I was just like, I'm just a little independent guy who just thought you'd be the guy who was handling all the publishing and stuff. It was very naive on my part, but I was like, confused on how I don't know how any of that stuff works. So 2014, I was in the deepest darkest recesses of my working at Publix phase, which I was probably more depressed than I've ever been in my life while I was working at Publix, which I know I've gone into before in some of these videos. There's more of that reluctant Messiah stuff. I love this image. There's a scene in the book where the Messiah guy was walking on water as Messiahs do, but then there's this sort of subversion of the system where the guy who's hanging out with him like sinks into the dirt as if it's water, and I always like that image. Let's see. I think I have. Okay, so this right here, this is a good example of Sean Murphy. Sean Murphy permeating throughout my work. Poor guy. I mean, if Sean watched this, he'd be like, "Oh, this is just embarrassing," in the sense that I'm like, "Here's Sean Murphy." Now, this is me looking at Sean Murphy, going, "He does a lot of lines. I'm gonna do a lot of lines," and I had little to no idea why he did those lines. I just knew there was a lot of black and there was a lot of lines, and so I did that. So there's a lot of hatching lines on these faces that don't necessarily make sense. There's a lot of shadow that maybe shouldn't be there, or maybe it isn't in the right place. Also, not gatekeeping all this here, this table here, these chairs. This is all just me setting things up in 3D in SketchUp. I just made the scene in SketchUp, and that's how I did it. In the scene, the characters are they're supposed to be kind of, these characters can't see them in the background, and there's this sort of Kirby Crackle-esque magic kind of fog that they're standing in, and so like that's what all this is. And this is all just custom brush. I used so many custom brushes back then. I still do, but not as much as I used to. I used to rely way too heavily on custom brushes. It was like a new toy that I found, and I was just obsessed with it. Also, fun fact, this is drawn in Manga Studio 4, which is basically the first version of Clip Studio, and 4 was before it was Clip Studio 5 or Manga Studio 5. Before it was that, it was such a bare bones little program. You could literally only draw in black and white, and you could literally only draw in monochrome, so there were no gray layers. So if all this gray right here, it all comes across as halftone rather than gray pixels like Clip Studio. Man, that was a long time ago. Manga Studio 4. More of that. See, here's all these lines. Me just going, "Oh, Sean Murphy does lines." I think that panel's pretty good. These, you can see Pia Guerra kind of inspiration all over these clothes. That might have actually been a reference image there. Yeah, this table, this chair, 3D. 100% that's 3D. That cabinet might be drawn, but who cares? It's right over the edge. That would just be like 1-point perspective anyway. Composition on these pages isn't bad. Here's an example of storytelling, not so great. This hat, it's kind of unclear. This hat leads into panel 2, but it also leads into panel 3. It's not terrible, but if I was doing it again, if I was to fix this panel would be cut off right here. So it's not bleeding into this panel. And the hat would either be over farther, so it's only pointing into panel 3, Man, that custom brush is all over this page. They're all over this comic. That right there, that's a Pia Guerra face. Here's a good example of a symbol mouth. That right there, that mouth, that's a symbol. That's me not knowing how to draw a mouth, or that's me not thinking about drawing a mouth. That's just, oh, I need this gridded mouth. Let's go like Ninja Turtles or something, you know? And you get better at that in the sense that you start, your stamps or your symbols, they start to be a little more realistic. That's why it's good to learn how to draw this stuff for real. So then, yeah, you're repeating shapes, but you're repeating the right shapes. So there's a lot of Sean Murphy inspiration going on at this point. There's a lot of these lines, and then in the black, me trying to do a lot of that sort of everything's in shadow. That's a lot of me being like going, oh, I wish I was Sean Murphy. There's also still some Steven Sejic stuff in there. There's the cutting white out of black shape stuff I found with Sejic. But then, you know, Pia Guerra is still in there as well with the clothes and these faces. I think there's a lot of Pia Guerra in my faces. I never, until I started to make this video, I never realized just how much Pia Guerra is in my faces. I always considered Pia Guerra, Y the Last Man, a big influence on me artistically, but now that I'm actually looking at it, I'm like, wow, it really is. And this is stuff that I, like, as much as I thought about it, it just came naturally. It's just like, ooh, I want to incorporate that into my work. Now, like, this face right here, I'm not the biggest fan of it, but like, you know, let's imagine I put one of this is where friction comes in. There's like a bit of friction that goes in. Like, you can, as an artist, as a skilled draftsman, draw any shape you want to draw, right? But it also has to fit in with everything around it. So like, I can choose to put, like, I don't know, a Chris Sanders nose or a Chris Sanders ear on this face, and that's a choice I could make. But even if it looked right, here's the interesting thing, right? Even if it looked good, there would be friction in the sense that it would bump me. I would feel weird about it. It wouldn't work for me. And even if it was something that, even if it looked all right, it still wouldn't be okay to me. So this is where the friction, the choices come in. So like, this is where the idea that that comic art or comic style or art style, sorry, is very much handwriting, or it's not a choice in a lot of ways, because there is like an aspect of it that is just, if you do it, you can make yourself do it, but you're not going to feel right about it, even if it looks okay. So there's this weird sort of push and pull between drawing things the correct way and drawing things the way you want to and drawing things that work with the image. And that's where the friction part comes in. I guess the best example I can say for that is, God, I love that image, is one of, okay, I'm going to throw out two different artists. They're both like fantasy artists. They both are painters, very big in the fantasy painting art, heavy metal hurlant scene. And there's no way you haven't heard of these artists, but let's go. Boris Vallejo. Not necessarily just Conan, but just Boris Vallejo. I'm sorry, my voice, my throat's getting a little scratchy. Let me drink some coffee real quick. Boris Vallejo art. And let's just go Boris Vallejo and Julie Bell, because they're pretty much a team. Okay. Hot take. I hate their work, um, it does nothing for me. Now, here's the thing, right? And this is not me insulting their skill or whatever. I mean, look at that. It doesn't get any better than that. This is the weird thing where I'm like, these are probably two of the greatest living artists out there. Like, they are so incredibly good at what they do, but I hate their work. It's too pretty, it's too polished, it's too perfect. Their work does very little for me. But at the same time, does it get any better? Like, as far as skill goes, Boris Vallejo and Julie Bell, like, Vallejo? I don't know how you say it. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to be dismissive. Like, it doesn't get any better as far as skill, talent, you know. So strange that Rogue is, like, trending right now so much. All because her butt isn't big enough in the new cartoon. Isn't that weird? It's sort of pathetic. So, their work does nothing for me. It never has. I don't. There's something about it. It's just too polished. It's too pretty. But like I said, like, they're probably some of the most skilled, talented artists to ever live. And, you know, who am I, right? Let's go. Same genre, different artist. One of my favorites of all time. I love his work. Luis Royo. There might be nudity in this. I don't mean if. I'm sorry if there is. He was a heavy metal guy. This guy, something about his work, especially when I was like 19, hanging out at a Borders, I ran into the Art of Luis Royo book, and something about this guy's work just blew me away. It might be his voice as much as it's his voice as much as his skill. Because I mean, I wouldn't say his like he draws kind of the same woman over and over again, which is sort of a difference between Boris and Julie. Boris and Julie use a lot of photo reference, and I know Luis Royo does use photo reference. There's no way he doesn't. But for the most part, he draws like the same woman over and over again. So he's not using photo reference in the same way that Boris and Julie do. Let me see if I can find the actual stuff I'm looking for. Let's see, Third Millennium. I think that's what it was called. Yep, Boris and Julie, Third Millennium. This book specifically. Something about, like, when I was 19 years old, hanging out at a Borders, I ran into this book, and there was something about the post-apocalyptic wasteland of it, the sketchiness of it, whatever. Like, Luis Royo was my guy. There's that right there, the Luis Royo Third Millennium post-apocalyptic stuff. Here's another example of an artist influencing me, and I could show you exactly where it is right here. This girl right here, her name is Julie, and she is very much an inspiration from Luis Royo. Me looking at that, coming back to my sketchbook, going, I'm gonna write a story about that girl. And there she is. Her name is Julie. She's got a sword. She's got like all this netting kind of wrapped around her, this ratty stuff. There she is again. That's Julie. That netting right there, that's Luis Royo all the way. This sort of rip short stuff. This girl was 100% inspired by Luis Royo. There's my very pathetic attempt at a ruined city in the background, She was everywhere. I was drawing her like crazy when I was 19 years old. And this image right here, the reason all three of these look different is this is drawn, I want to say this is me looking at a David Finch piece and trying to replicate the pose. Might be Michael Turner. She's very thin, so it might have a Turner, but I want to say this is David Finch, or me looking at a David Finch piece. This right here, this is me definitely looking at a photograph and drawing the pose. This is just bullshit out of my head. This pose was this is just me sketching. I can tell the anatomy's off, the pose is wrong. Like, this is 100% out of my head. This right here, very much another. This is a photo. Oh, there's another bit of what do you call it? The Chris Sanders round features kind of stuff going on. There was a lot of that. But yeah, this girl, 100% inspired by Louis Royo. And that's that's more of that inspiration stuff. Like, your voice is as much inspired as your lines and your shape words are. Your voice is the kind of stuff you want to draw, the tone of the stuff you want to draw. So in my early 20s, I was obsessed with the idea of the post-apocalyptic wastelands and things like that. I think I've gotten over that in a lot of ways. I think it's gotten just a little too real for me. The post-apocalypse, after things like The Walking Dead and The Road and Last of Us and whatnot, the cool sort of fantasy element of the post-apocalypse is gone, and now there's nothing but the realization of what the post-apocalypse really is. But when I was a kid, these images just blew me away. This wasteland just looked so cool. It didn't even look like the Earth anymore. It was something else, and that was all over my work. So yeah, like, just another one of those things. I mean, I don't know if I've achieved anything with this video at all, but like, that's kind of my whole point. Is that's what style is. Style is, it's as I said, it's a dance between. I'm gonna go ahead and read it again, right? It's an ever-evolving dance between limitations, symbols, aesthetic taste, and inspiration. And that's why you look at guys like J. Scott Campbell, and you look at their early work, and then you look at their new work, and you're like, I can tell it's the same artist. It's very much the same artist. There's just something about the shape language has become more pronounced. It's more him, and that's how style works. It's a choice as much as it's not a choice, and it's this ever evolving kind of deal. So yeah, I think that's all for now.